Hello everyone and welcome back to this online NPTEL course on aquatic geochemistry. In this module we had been discussing the freshwater chemistry, and we had discussed rainwater, glacier meltwater, river water in the previous lectures, and in this particular lecture we are going to talk about lakes. And what is interesting about lakes is, lakes, when we look into lakes, most of the lakes have a particular problem which is known as eutrophication. And I think almost all of you have seen a lake some point of time in your life, and you would very well notice its color. Okay, so most of the time we will see that the lakes are very green. Okay, the greenness can vary. So, from clear water to greenness, it is how the color varies in lakes, and this is a sign of eutrophication. Or when we see a lot of aquatic plants, okay, there are particular species of aquatic plants that clearly indicates this problem of eutrophication. Okay, and it is a worldwide problem. It is not only that only one particular country has it. No, it is a worldwide problem, and it has been observed for a very long time, and we are going to discuss particularly this problem because of its extreme nature, and it can basically make or break the entire ecosystem. So, lakes are like they are like guardians, environmental, it helps us understand how the environment is at that particular location. It can have a lot of ecological as well as human benefits. For instance, so lakes, they obviously offer benefits such as to the ecosystem. So, they will have fishes, they will have birds and the natural flora and fauna. But for humans, they can act as a buffer. So, if there is a flood, the flood waters are supposed to go into the lake water gets filled and everything. Again, if there is a drought, the people can sometimes depend on these lakes and they can draw the water. And maintenance of the lake water quality becomes very difficult because of its openness. So, anyone can come and dump something. There can be a lot of naturally there is, since it is a closed system, these are called these are not flowing system. How are these lakes formed? Either they got cut off from a river, or they got there is a groundwater coming into this kind of depression. So, it is basically like a basin. Okay, and here the rainwater gets collected or the groundwater gets collected. So, if there is a continuous supply, then it is a big lake, it is a perennial lake. If it is a much smaller lake, smaller volume, then it may be a seasonal lake, that it gets dries up in the dry season and only during the monsoon it gets filled up. Okay, so, for particular seasons it is there, and with the dry season it just all evaporates. But these are very particular systems, and their chemistry is again very interesting and very different from the flowing systems, because they do not have that kind of flow that takes away the pollution. So, whatever is coming into the system remains the system. Okay, it does not have a sink. Either what happens is that the lake is connected to a river, okay, and therefore it has a outflow. So, most of the lakes may have an outflow, but whether it has an inflow or not, that may be difficult to understand. In fact, most of the inflows that the lakes are having now are created by humans. So, either they are sewage pipes coming and dumping the sewage into the lakes and connecting two lakes manually, more human ways. So, that kind of has happened, and this kind of has led to a lot of eutrophication related problems. Now, let us try to understand therefore what it is. So, to start with this, we are going to begin with what is a nutrient. Okay. So, nutrient is a substance that is required for the growth and development of an organism that it itself cannot produce, right. When we say that we need nutrients, we need proteins and everything, that means we ourselves are not producing it for ourselves, right. We need that substance from outside for our growth and nourishment. Okay. Now, this in this discussion of nutrients, we know what are nutrients, right. We have nitrogen, we have phosphorus, we have silica, which are the main building blocks, and those are the major nutrients, and we have what is called the micronutrients. Now, in the freshwater systems, silica is not that well considered, okay, because in the freshwater systems we have mostly the kind of bacteria that does not depend on a lot of silica for its building of shells and all that. In oceans, in ocean water, the silica is an important, very important nutrient because of the prevalence of diatoms. Okay, these diatoms, they need a lot of silica. Okay, their bodies are made up of silica and their shells are made up of silica. So, their silica is very well considered, but for freshwater microorganisms, this becomes the very important nutrient. And for nutrient, it is not only the abundant one that causes the problem, it is the most the discussion is often related to the nutrient that is not available. Okay. So, it is the limiting factor, that is if when supplied in excess, that causes the problem. For instance, in freshwater systems, nitrogen and phosphorus are the limiting factors. Okay. That means, if you are suddenly flooding your system with nitrogen and with phosphorus, then what will happen is that you will see a lot of algal bloom. Okay, a lot of algal bloom will happen on the surface of the water, and you can see something like this, like these are very fine particles you can see here. You will not have any structure, it is just like a lot of algal mass. Okay. So, this kind of algal bloom will happen, or there will be the growth of weeds and all that. So, once these kind of weeds grow and the algal bloom happens, this cuts the oxygen exchange directly with the atmosphere. Okay. And the algae and their their population increases so much that they often use up a lot of oxygen for the respiration, and this algae being microorganisms, their life cycles are also very short. So, they will die and they will start decaying. So, that decay again will take up a lot of oxygen. Okay. So, the bacteria that is there on the bottom in the anoxic zones, they will use these dead algae and they will break down, and the oxygen will get depleted during this process. What happens finally is that the surface of the water, which is covered in all these algae, does not allow much oxygen to come in. The decaying of the algae body is again depleting the oxygen. Then the fishes do not have any oxygen to breathe. So, what happens is all the fishes die, right, all the fishes are slowly going to die. So, the first will be those which are very sensitive, which cannot tolerate even a slight fluctuation of oxygen, but as soon as it gets low and low, almost all the animals and all the all the aquatic animals, be it fishes, be it insects, be it the smaller organisms, all of them start dying. So, this is what we call is a phenomena of eutrophication, which is a nutrient driven stimulation resulting in complete oxygen depletion that alters the biogeochemical cycling of elements and degrades the water quality. Okay. It is a final, it's like very poor water quality because the oxygen is so low, the decaying matter is so high, and the fish, when it starts decaying, it can start smelling very awful. So, this is a very common fate of many lakes that we see. And when we ask ourselves, okay, why is it happening? What can control it? Okay, what mitigation steps do we need to, once a lake is, when we see eutrophication, what can we do to help the, restore the original conditions? So, let us see some of the process in details. So, in freshwater systems, the key nutrients that we are going to talk about is phosphorus and then is nitrogen. Now, phosphorus is the typically limiting nutrient. So, when we are going to monitor, we are going to monitor both nitrogen and phosphorus, but this is our primary limiting nutrient in freshwater system. That means the bacteria is this, the algae, they are not growing because phosphorus is low. The moment phosphorus level slightly peaks, then we are going to see eutrophication. Okay. It is just a simple boom waiting to happen because phosphorus is not there. Nitrogen often with phosphorus is co-limiting, that means nitrogen is also low, and with that phosphorus, if it comes, it will again cause that algal bloom. Let us see what is the process happening. So, first thing is the nutrient enrichment. Where is this nutrients coming from? Most of the time it is humans that is adding to that. So, there can be natural processes or there can be anthropogenic. What can be the natural processes that we can think of? Natural, it can come from when there is a flooding. Okay. If there is flooding happening, that is a natural cause. Okay. Naturally, the nutrients, they are going to dissolve in the water and all this flood water is going to go into the lake. So, that is a natural. Again, if there is a landslide, okay, again another disaster. Okay, if there is a landslide, if there is a mobilization of lot of sediments, and these sediments are going to fill up in that lake, then again this is going to have a lot of eutrophication because of all the phosphates and nitrogen and everything that is bound into the sediments is going to get released. But mostly they are from anthropogenic sources. For instance, as fertilizers, of course, we have increased the application of fertilizers for our agricultural boom that we say. We are living in a time of maximum and surplus production. So, thanks to all the fertilizers that we are adding to the lands, so definitely fertilizers. Then there is sewage, right? We are also using the water, we are throwing out that water. So, all the sewage that we are contributing to. So, same thing, sewage, wastewater effluents, and urban runoff. What is urban runoff? Urban runoff can mean anything that is coming from the road surface and all the displacement that we are doing from the natural. So, land is being cleared to make buildings, to make roads, everything that goes into an urbanization that we see, all that controls, enhances runoff and it is going into the lake. Once it reaches the lakes, then there is a rapid increase and the phytoplankton and the algae, the macrophytes, they are all blooming, right. They just found the good concentrations of nitrogen and phosphorus, they are all very happy, they are growing. What happens then? Then senescence. Senescence means they grow old, they start deteriorating, then they die. Okay, so deterioration and death, and thereafter the decay of that biomass that now is almost covering the lake is going to deplete the oxygen. okay, because these microorganisms, they have very short life cycle, maybe only a few days, maybe maximum a month. If there is macrophytes, and maybe a year or two, and then they die. Okay, when they die, all that decaying will take up the oxygen that is dissolved in the water. That will create a hypoxia or anoxia that will kill the fishes. So, it is a habitat loss. All the benthic and the plantic animals, they are all going to die. Benthic means floating. Okay, they are benthic meaning they are all floating animals, they are living in the water column, fishes, snails, insects, everything. Then there are bottom dwellers. Okay, they are the bottom dwellers are there. They are more like larvae and insects and other kind of fungi and every kind of all other organisms that you can say, they are all there. And it is a collapse of the entire food web. Birds gets affected, trees, everything, all the life gets destroyed. So, the natural aquatic plants which are there, they are also dying because of this algal bloom. So, that is the entire food web collapse. And not only the food web collapses, what are the other consequences that we can see? So, we shift from the entire oxic conditions to a reducing condition now. Okay, we had enough oxygen in the system was at peace. Now, we have anoxia, we have death, we have decaying organic matter. We have shifted the system from an oxygen rich to an oxygen poor reducing condition. Even the pH may get changed. Okay, it may become more acidic with the release of more and more dead decaying organic matter, even the pH may fall. Okay. What then happens is that there is more release of sediment bound phosphorus. There is gradual coming in, it is just getting more and more released. All the pH sensitive elements may get released, all the redox sensitive elements get released. So, there is enhanced FeMN reduction and mobilization of redox sensitive elements. What do you mean by FeMN reduction? Fe and Mn, when they are oxic water, they get precipitated. Okay. They get precipitated out and settle down as a Fe hydroxide and manganese hydroxides and oxides. But during anoxic event, they get again dissolved. They again get dissolved. These hydroxides and the minerals that are precipitated, they again get dissolved, because then the Fe3 plus that was precipitated is going to change to Fe2 plus, which is going to dissolve, So, all the metals which are redox sensitive, they are going to get released back into the water. And not only the metals, nitrogen cycle also itself gets altered because of the changing denitrification and nitrification processes. Okay, they are also getting altered. So, let us look into the phosphorus cycle. Now, in phosphorus, what we are measuring is mentioned in this table. Okay. So, we can either measure total phosphorus, that means, if we are not going to separate out the dissolved and the particulate forms, we take an unfiltered water sample, we just digest the entire sample, and then we are going to run the sample and we are going to find out what is the total phosphorus concentration. So, that is the total phosphorus. Then what we have is the total dissolved phosphorus or the total soluble phosphorus, TDP or TSP. Okay. That is when we are going to separate out the dissolved phase and the particulate phase. So, using a filter paper, we are separating out the dissolved and the particulate, and then we are going to measure them separately. Then something called the soluble reactive phase. The soluble reactive phosphorus, that is the biologically available phosphorus, but for that we are going to analyze a sample within 12 to 24 hours after collection. Very soon we have to analyze that, or we can do it using, nowadays there are probes that are there that measures SRP, that is the soluble reactive phosphorus. That is a biologically active phosphorus found in the water itself, because as soon as you take that water out, filter it and do things, it will get changed, it will change in the process, because there is continuous biological activity happening. That phosphorus is going to decrease. Then there is of course particulate phosphorus, which is basically all the collided and the suspended phases, and if we are going to measure the total phosphorus and the dissolved, then a simple subtraction can help us find out what is the particulate phosphorus. So, this is a phosphorus cycle, what happens. Okay. Now, phosphorus mostly coming from phosphatic rocks, that is applied as fertilizers or chemically fertilizers are made. They are applied for agriculture, okay, they are put into the soil. Then from the soil they can come as runoff, they can either be dissolved or be sediment bound. So, mostly phosphorus in oxic waters, they are more sediment and they are absorbed, okay, they are absorbed onto the sediments. Okay. So, these are the more sediment bound phosphorus, and whatever is there in the atmosphere, from atmospheric deposition also, that phosphorus can come as dry deposition or wet deposition. Okay. Now, all these phosphorus, there can be going to the lake, and there can be of course groundwater, okay, the stored pool, that is in the soil, it is like a stored pool of phosphorus. Somehow it can get released to the runoff. What happens when it reaches the lakes? During the when it is going to the lakes, the cyanobacteria and all that, that is taking up the phosphorus, and when it is getting dissolved in the phosphorus, thus phosphorus can get exchanged within the water column. It can get released due to different reactions, it can get released into the water column. So, these sediment water interactions and everything, they are getting released, and the cyanobacteria and algae and all that, they are all using up this phosphorus, right. In this inset is a comparison of the global phosphorus inputs coming from natural sources, that is natural weathering of rocks and all, as compared to anthropogenic activities. Okay. So, the mining of particular phosphate rocks. This shows how human activities have doubled the amount of phosphorus that is in active circulation. If this would have not been there, if this mining of phosphate rocks would not have been there, though from natural weathering we would have had only 20 Tg per year of phosphorus. But now thanks to all the fertilizer industries and everything, it's double, and this is only from 2001. So, into 2025 we can increase the numbers significantly. You can see for much much higher values are going to be expected. Looking into nitrogen, similarly nitrogen will have again different fractions and analytical separations and all that what you can do. So, we can either have total nitrogen, that is again another unfiltered sample, you totally digest and go and measure it. So, that is the total nitrogen. Then there can be something which is called the total Kjeldahl nitrogen, which is basically going to measure all the organic forms of nitrogen. Then we have separate phases of nitrogen, that is we can have ammonium, we can have nitrate, we can have nitrate. So, different species of nitrogen. Okay. And often when we are measuring in surface water, we are measuring this, we are measuring both nitrite and nitrate together, and sometimes we measure the nitrates. So, we can get back the value of nitrite, but often when we are measuring we are getting the entire nitrate and nitrite. Okay. Then there is inorganic and organic. Of course, I told you last in inorganic lecture that everything also has a organic and inorganic composition. So, the dissolved inorganic nitrogen is the ammonium, is the ammonia, and is the nitrate and the nitrite together. Whereas, if you subtract the total nitrogen from the inorganic, you can directly get the organic nitrogen, or you can have separate analytical methods to analyze the organic nitrogen. Now, again, this is again a simplified nitrogen cycle in a lake catchment that shows how the nitrogen inputs is coming from fertilizers and from higher runoff, specifically when there is agricultural wastewater coming into the lakes. Okay. These shows that when it enters the lakes, the kind of processes. So, there is organic nitrogen, it can go to ammonification, then after ammonification it goes to nitrification, then another bacteria called the nitrobacter, it changes it to nitrate. This nitrate is the version that again is taken up by algae and bacteria. Ammonia is also taken up by cyanobacteria. Again, these nitrates are useful for the aquatic plants. So, again they are going to be growing and all, and through the denitrifying bacteria it is again going to get released back into the atmosphere. So, this is the nitrogen cycle that can get altered due to a lot of sudden release of nitrogen into the system. This entire nitrogen cycling can get altered during eutrophication process. Okay. So, this simple process of nitrogen cycle will no longer be functional because of this huge algal bloom. In addition to the runoff, there can be a lot of atmospheric deposition also, because nitrogen comes from the atmospheric deposition through during the lightning cycle. If there is lightning and there is rain, then directly it will come down. Okay. So, it is not only through runoff it is coming, it can also come from the atmosphere. But of course, the amount that is coming from dry and wet deposition will be very different from what is coming from direct fertilizer, sewage entry and agricultural inputs and all that. That will cause immediate changes into the lake water lake water composition and eutrophication. Again, in the inset it shows how much global nitrogen is coming from natural sources. Okay. So, there is biological sources and from lightning and all, and as much as coming from anthropogenic. Okay. So, there is industrial sources, there is leguminous crops which we are growing more and more. We prefer growing leguminous crops because they try to maintain the nitrogen in the soil. So, to maintain the nitrogen cycle, we have every rotation of the normal crops with leguminous crops. So, it is beneficial for the health of the soil. So, that those kind of leguminous crops, due to such kind of agricultural practices, we have increased the nitrogen concentration in the soil. Then fossil fuel combustion. Of course, we are burning some kind of decaying organic matter. So, there will be coming nitrogen released from those fossil fuel emissions. Now, what happens, how to control it? So, this is a table showing how much contribution is coming from the different sources. So, we find that the municipal waste, the sewer systems, the septic tanks, they control the maximum of problems, okay, as compared to industry. Agricultural again is again a huge problem, okay, because of course, fertilizers, they directly are nitrogen and phosphorus compounds. So, during our source approximation, we know that municipal wastewater and agricultural wastewater, they are the main problems of eutrophication. as compared to industry and aquaculture, which may be coming with a lot of other pollutants. Such industries, they will be coming with a lot of metals or a lot of hydrocarbons, and with a lot of emerging contaminants, pharmaceuticals, a lot of different kinds of chemicals. Aquaculture, a lot of maybe pharmaceuticals, a lot of antibiotics, a lot of some other medicines that they use for the growth and protecting the fishes from other diseases. So, therefore, we know which to focus on. Okay, knowing this kind of system, we know which to focus on. We definitely have something to do with the agricultural waste when it is going into the lakes. We definitely need to do something with the municipal waste. In fact, all waste before it gets released to any aquatic system needs to go through some kind of treatment procedure. So, the most effective way to handle eutrophication is first understanding which anthropogenic activity is impacting it the most, and therefore, our efforts in controlling those activity and their remediation has to be appropriately done. Okay. The mitigation strategies, the mitigation strategies meaning the restraining strategies would be the recovery of the nutrients from the animal waste, the urban sewage. Okay, if somehow those waste can be converted back to fertilizers, and if they can be processed back into the system. So, this is called recycling, reusing. Okay, if those waste can somehow be again reused. Again, managing human population is definitely something we have to work on. Agricultural nutrient demand, how much the agriculture needs and how much we are giving, how much pressure we are giving on our agriculture. Advancing sanitation technologies. Okay, if somehow we can decrease our the effluents that is going, somehow if they can be managed much better way from the households to the aquatic systems. Okay. So, increasing more low water, low cost, efficient technologies is what we require. Promotion of the use of green water, soil water as compared to blue water, that is surface and groundwater, in food and resource production. What does this mean? This means that when we are planning our agricultural activities, we plan according to the hydroclimatic conditions, and that is what it has been agriculture in the past. Now, it is more difficult because of the scale in which we work on. So, previously it was green water, that is the natural moisture in the soil itself that determined the agriculture. Okay. If it is the dry season, then we would plant crops which is suitable for that dry weather. If it is the monsoon season, then crops that requires lot of water, we are going to plant that kind of water. But now, due to pressure of production, sometimes farmers are planting even if there is no water, we are going to plant more water intensive crops, and we are going to get the water from canals, and we are going to dig up the water from groundwater, or we are going to use the lake water or river water, or somehow we are going to get the water. So, that kind of shift in strategies in agriculture has happened, and we have to again go back and think which is more important and feasible economically and socially. So, these are very important decisions that the government takes, keeping in mind the needs of the people and then the needs of the environment. Okay. Restoration strategies, what kind of, once the lake gets affected, what kind of restoration strategies can we practice? There can be selective removal of the nutrient rich waters. So, either you do add something to remove the nutrient rich deep waters. Okay. The oxygen can be enhanced, okay, or chemical immobilization by addition of more calcium based salts. So, those kind of changes can be done to that system. Regulatory methods can be done. For instance, how much phosphate is there in your detergents, that can be regularized. if this lakes and water, river water often faces the problem, then at the catchment scale, the agricultural divisions, they need to establish a particular fertilizer and nutrient control systems. That means, you can only apply this much amount of fertilizer to the crops in a particular given season, and that has to be applied at a catchment scale, and only then we are going to see some proper changes. Otherwise, it is very difficult to control such kind of systems, and often we just rely upon some kind of remediation. That means, we are going to add some chemicals to the system that is going to make the water or more oxygen rich and enhance deposition of the nitrates and phosphates. So, some method of removal. Okay. So, those kind of activities we are going to do to restore back the lake back to its original condition. With this, I come to an end to this particular lecture, and in the next lecture I am going to continue with groundwater systems. Thank you.